Some of the New Orleans Saints' biggest additions will be under the most pressure in Week 1 because they can help the Saints get better where they desperately need to. We got all of that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? I am your host, your friend, Ross Jackson, New Orleans native, your New Orleans Saints expert and credentialed member of the media covering those New Orleans Saints as a Saints beat writer over at LouisianaSports.net. And on today's episode of Locked On Saints, Week 1 is finally here. And so we're taking a look at all the big names and big storylines that make this first game between the New Orleans Saints and Arizona Cardinals what it is. We'll take a look at some of the biggest additions and moves for the Arizona Cardinals, including the pass catcher that you might not be thinking about when you think about Arizona right off the bat. We'll dive into a big-time pass catcher that the New Orleans Saints need to get off to a fast start, and that's tight end Juwan Johnson. And we'll kick things off with three of the biggest additions for the New Orleans Saints and how they can help the Saints improve where they desperately need improvement from last year's showing. We got all that and a little more coming up for you on today's episode. We appreciate you very much, whether it's your first time or your next time, being here with us this time, making us your first listen and being it every day, or here on the show, which is a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Three of the New Orleans Saints' biggest additions will go under the microscope and see a lot of pressure here in the first week of the season. We'll take a look at Davon Godchaux, the big trade acquisition. Justin Reid, the New Orleans Saints safety, one of the biggest free agency acquisitions. And first round draft pick Kelvin Banks Jr. All three have the ability to help the New Orleans Saints where it is that they have struggled the most over the course of the past few years. And so they will be under a lot of pressure going up against the Arizona Cardinals in Week 1. Now, these aren't the only players that are under pressure in Week 1. Obviously, you have a brand new starting quarterback in Spencer Rattler. You can go off of the player chart and player roster and look at head coach Kellen Moore in his first year ever as a head coach. Brandon Staley getting back to defensive coordinator after being a very successful defensive coordinator back in 2020 with the Los Angeles Rams. But we're focusing on the new additions today. And so I want to start off with Davon Godchaux. To me, Davon Godchaux has the capability of being one of the most important contributors throughout the New Orleans Saints 2025 season because the Saints were 31st in the NFL in rushing yards allowed. They got absolutely eaten up in the run game all throughout the season last year. The Saints trade for Davon Godchaux knowing that he can help stop that. Davon shared a story about Brandon Staley and knowing how Brandon Staley felt about him as Brandon Staley and the Los Angeles Chargers, who were the offensive coordinator at the time, Kellen Moore, they're flying to New England to take on the Patriots, and Brandon Staley letting Kellen Moore know, don't think you're going to be able to run the ball very easily with number 9-2 in the middle. Now, you get an opportunity as Brandon Staley to go after that guy, number 92, and you bring him here to New Orleans. That is how important Davon Godchaux is looked at when it comes to the New Orleans Saints team, and especially over on the defensive side. Brandon Staley obviously had a lot of appreciation for him when they were playing against him. Now he gets to actually have him on his roster. And of course, with that new Brandon Staley-led defense at defensive coordinator, you're seeing that odd front, though still multiple, but a lot of that odd front usage, which means odd number of players. So you need somebody right in the middle, right over that center. And that's exactly the role that Davon Godchaux fills. And he is going to be massive in helping this team, specifically from the run game standpoint, because of the fact that he is such a kind of muck up the middle type in the middle of that defense. He's very disruptive on the defensive line. He can walk your center back, all those other pieces. That is absolutely detrimental to a run game, and he can absolutely be detrimental to that run game. But because he can walk that safety back, it flushes quarterbacks to the outside, hopefully running into your more athletic edge rushers that are being utilized in more athletic ways in this system, or of course, eating up blockers on the inside to create some one-on-one opportunities for other pass rushers to get in there and get to the quarterback as well. So his value is far beyond just that of a run stopper, but his run stopping ability could be the thing that is most imperative to the New Orleans Saints in terms of trying to keep a game in and under control against a pretty successful rushing team last year that had the fourth most 15 plus yard rushes in the NFL. So you're trying to keep some of those explosive plays down. He's a guy that can help you do that in the middle of that defense. Speaking of keeping the explosive plays down, that's another place where New Orleans struggled last year, gave up amongst the most when it came to 20-plus yard passing plays, as well as 15-plus yard rushing plays. And a guy like Justin Reid, who was the big offseason acquisition, signed to a 3-year deal here in New Orleans, he will be key in limiting those big plays. He's the quarterback of the defense. And this is a New Orleans Saints safety position that could have gone downhill very quickly. They could have nosedived very fast after losing Tyrann Mathieu to his retirement. And then now you get Justin Reid, who steps in and takes over that command and control of the defense, being able to send blitzers, being able to drop guys into coverage, being able to make decisions on his own as well, based upon what he's seeing from the offense that's ahead of him. He is going to be the pre-snap key for this New Orleans Saints, down in and down out all season long. And so him coming in and stepping into that role where the Saints are losing a major contributor in Tyrann Mathieu, the timing could not have been better for New Orleans. Tyrann Mathieu gets to retire and then go on and see what his next endeavors are. I assume coaching at some point, but it looks like he's going to do some media stuff first. Of course, gets to be with his family. Meanwhile, Justin Reid takes the field for New Orleans, replacing Tyrann Mathieu now for the third time. He followed Tyrann Mathieu with the Houston Texans, followed him again in Kansas City with the Chiefs, and now follows him here in New Orleans. And so this is a guy that not only has experience playing at a high level at safety, but he has experience in trying to make up for the absence of a Tyrann Mathieu as best as you can make up for the absence of a Tyrann Mathieu. So that leadership is going to be big for this New Orleans Saints team, and Justin Reid seems very ready to bring it. Finally, Kelvin Banks Jr. It's tough when you're a first-round pick, and in the same draft class, there's a second-round quarterback that's the highest drafted quarterback since the 70s in your draft class. You don't get a lot of attention in that case. And sometimes that could be a good thing. Sometimes that could be a little bit of a bothersome thing for Kelvin Banks Jr. I think he's taken it as a good thing. Has not been a lot of eyes on him, although there have been a lot of eyes on him within the facility, and everyone is very impressed with what they have seen from the young, first-time starting, first-year NFL left tackle. That is not an easy job to have, especially when you also have a brand new head coach that's teaching an entire roster, a brand new system, and that's coming in with a brand new quarterback in terms of starting there as well. And that is a lot of newness there. But Kelvin Banks Jr. was outstanding. He was the rookie player throughout the preseason that played the most snaps at tackle without allowing a sack. And in fact, I'm not even sure if he allowed a pressure all throughout the preseason. He was awesome then. And the expectation is that he'll continue to be awesome just like he was over in Texas as well. The New Orleans Saints absolutely need to be able to protect their quarterback, but also need to be able to establish a run game. And that's going to be the next big test for this New Orleans Saints team. And Kelvin Banks Jr. is here to help them do that. So those three guys, Davon Godchaux, Justin Reid, Kelvin Banks Jr., under a lot of pressure as the newcomers, some of the biggest newcomers showing up here for the New Orleans Saints week 1. Now let's shift from a newcomer to a returning player in Juwan Johnson, who absolutely needs to be off to a fast start for the first time in a while here in New Orleans. We got that coming up for you next as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. The NFL season is here, and you know how it be sometimes. You and your friends decide that you want to go to an NFL game at the last minute, and you go and you check some of those ticketing prices, and the tickets just keep going up and up and up, and it's hard to find what it is that you're looking for. That is where Game Time comes in. It's the app that helps you take advantage and gives the advantage back to fans. Game Time is fast, it's easy, and it's backed by the Game Time guarantee. You'll always get 100% authentic tickets delivered on time and at the best price. Plus, all fees are included, so you see the price that you see is actually the price that you pay. I pulled up Game Time not too long ago just to see where tickets were, and you can get some amazing deals at around $100 for your favorite NFL events. So download the Game Time app today, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code Locked On for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. The NFL season is almost here, and FanDuel is making sure that you can kick off your season with another can't miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5. And if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. That's everything from odds, lines, and props to live betting, which is one of my favorites. I love live betting, especially during college football weekends where you can expect some of those big comebacks, even favorites to maybe start off in a hole and to be able to dig themselves out, much unlike Alabama this past weekend. But there's a ton more. You can even get in on some props as well. One of the ones that I really like is over on Juwan Johnson's receiving yards in this first game up against Arizona. So go and check all of it out. And if you're ready to play, you can do so today by downloading the FanDuel app now and by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. If you win that bet, you can get $300 in bonus bets. FanDuel.com. All right, family. While there are some newcomers to this New Orleans Saints team that are going to be under pressure to show some help this team, rather, show some improvement in 2025. Some individual players are going to be looking to show some early improvement as well. And the first name that jumps off the page for me is tight end Juwan Johnson. He got a 3-year, $30+ million contract to return to New Orleans, had a late night conversation with Kellen Moore that basically was around like, how do you want to use me? What do you want me back for? What's the purpose? All these other things. And sort of making sure that he had a role here in New Orleans. And clearly, Kellen Moore has made that statement or has made that known that Juwan Johnson will indeed have that role and has done a lot of things throughout the season here or throughout the offseason here to prove to Juwan that that role is absolutely there. I've asked him on a couple different occasions if he feels like things are on track with what was discussed with him during that late night phone call. And he has, kind of adamantly agreed that it's all been there for him. But I think one of the things that we've seen constantly with Juwan Johnson and something that he has pointed out himself is sort of the slow start to the seasons. If you take a look at weeks 1 through 9 of the last 2 years, 2023 and 2024, that gives you 18 possible games, 14 of which Juwan Johnson was in. On those games, he had 33 receptions for 320 receiving yards and just 2 touchdowns. So you're talking about less than 10 or just right around less than 10 yards per reception, all that. But then you look at the latter parts of the season, weeks 10 through 18, where 16 possible games are, and he appeared in all 16 games. And during that, his targets almost doubled from 45 up to 80. You saw his receptions go from 33 to 54, and you saw his receiving yards go from 320 to 596, over 10 yards per reception, and then 5 touchdown receptions during those 16 games as well. So you've seen sort of this slow, sluggish start at the beginning of the season, but then a really strong finish, really 3 years in a row. But I just looked at the last 2 years, but you can go back to 2022 and find the exact same thing on tape. And so the big thing for Juwan Johnson is being given the opportunity to have a role early on in the season, which was not always the case, right? The Saints dealt with a lot of offensive line injuries, and they dealt with some injuries. And of course, they had guys like Taysom Hill and Foster Moreau that were taking some attention away from Juwan Johnson. Ideally, Juwan Johnson has no such roadblocks going into this 2025 season. Taysom Hill and Foster Moreau both on physically unable to perform, so they won't be able to return to practice until at least the earliest, the following the week 4 game. But then if the offensive line stays healthy, doesn't have to get relegated to being a blocker in those situations, which is what happened back in 2023 specifically. And so for Juwan, the opportunity has to be there for him, and he has to take advantage of that opportunity as well. He had a strong camp, and so I'm very much looking forward to seeing what he might be able to do in New Orleans with a fresh and new opportunity for him. This new system should work pretty well in terms of how it is that head coach Kellen Moore likes to utilize those tight ends, especially athletic tight ends that can run routes and get across the field. Think Dallas Goedert-like. Even though Dallas Goedert had less production than Juwan Johnson last year, you're hoping that maybe Juwan can do more with that role. And of course, stay on the field and stay healthy as well, like he did last season. So Juwan Johnson on track to have an opportunity for a big role. Now he has to be able to cash in on that opportunity and see what he's able to churn out here in New Orleans in 2025. And of course, with a young quarterback, having sort of that big body tight end that's operating close to the line of scrimmage, that's giving you a big target in the middle of the field. That's going to be a big time security blanket for Spencer Rattler to start the season as well. And so that could help Juwan Johnson have that early go. I think that his over under right now over at FanDuel's like 24.5 receiving yards. He averages over 49 receiving yards in the 5 games that Spencer Rattler played from snap 1 to the whistle at the end of the game. Not that which excludes that Chargers game, but even that Chargers game where he only played the first half, Juwan Johnson still averaged over 40 plus yards during that time. So I feel really good about Spencer Rattler and Juwan Johnson's connection. Now let's see how they take advantage of the opportunities. Going over to the defensive side of the football, big time opportunity sits there for a guy that we haven't talked about much because he's been dealing with injury. But of course, slot corner, Alontae Taylor. Alontae Taylor set a tone for himself right off the bat early last season with a 3-sack game up against the Carolina Panthers. That does not mean that he has to come into this week 1 matchup up against the Arizona Cardinals and walk away with 3 sacks. But if he did, I think you take it. But what we saw looking at just that last preseason game against the Denver Broncos, we saw a ton of Ugo Amadi blitzing, getting pressure, getting there in the backfield, being deployed in that way. That's what the star role is. That's Alontae Taylor's role right there. And so if Alontae Taylor is back and healthy and ready to go for the practice week leading up to this season, which if the Saints kept him on ice throughout the latter part of training camp, I think that was a very, very smart decision by this team if they really went about it that way. I think that was a very wise thing to do. You want Alontae Taylor at his best early on in this year because he's going to help you set the tone. He's going to help to generate some energy for that defense as well. And so I think that all of that coming together in this week 1 matchup in a system that should really lean in on what it is that Alontae Taylor does best as a chaos creator, as a disruptive player, this is a real opportunity for him too. So you want another guy that's got to get off to a fast start. That's going to be Alontae Taylor. And the same thing applies for him as what applies for Juwan Johnson. Go out there and get those opportunities. But then when you get those opportunities, take advantage of them. And he could potentially be the next big contract extension for the New Orleans Saints. The Saints didn't have their late training camp extension like they often do, but sometimes they'll do them after the first couple of games. We saw that with Demario Davis. We saw that with Marshawn Lattimore years ago, where the Saints had that game over in Jacksonville up against the Green Bay Packers. So could Alontae Taylor play himself into that conversation? Who knows? But maybe, certainly, he'll be able to play himself into an extension conversation by the end of the year, looking in terms of what's beyond here in 2025. And that's why a strong start in 2025 would be really important for the young defensive back, should he make his way back to the field this weekend. Coming up next, let's take a look at some of the biggest moves by the Arizona Cardinals this offseason and a big-bodied pass catcher that could cause the New Orleans Saints a lot of trouble. We got that coming up for you next as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This episode is presented by Yahoo Fantasy. Me and the rest of the Locked On executive team just did our fantasy football draft over on Locked On Fantasy because that's where we're going to be playing our fantasy football this year. And you should be too, whether you're a first timer or you're a veteran that's launching your millionth league. Season kickoff is this Thursday, September 4th. We're almost there. And so now is the time to start playing Yahoo Fantasy Football, which offers a bunch of fun ways to compete. You want more ways to play? Well, go and try the brand new Yahoo Fantasy Guillotine League mode, where the lowest scoring team gets eliminated each week until one team is left standing. Or if you want to play instantly with friends, try the new Draft with Friends mode. Prefer the classics, where you can still get your crew together and go head to head in a private league. No crew, no problem. Join a public league, the easiest way to play. NFL season kickoff is September 4th. We are almost there, so don't wait. Go and draft your team now at yahoofantasy.com/lockedonnfl. That's yahoofantasy.com/lockedonnfl. Today's episode brought to you by our friends over at Monarch Money. Monarch Money has been a lifesaver for me. It's an all-in-one app that allows you to be able to not only name all of your different financial accounts, but make sure you know what they're worth and make sure how to manage them and maximize them as well. Some people lose track. Monarch Money is here to help you do that. If you're losing track of some old subscriptions, Monarch Money can help you there. You're losing track of your expenses for your business, Monarch Money can help you there. Maybe you're even having some trouble with sharing the responsibilities with someone else that's supposed to be managing those accounts with you. Well, Monarch Money makes collaboration very, very simple. I went from having like 7 different financial apps to just this one in my banking app, and it has been awesome. So you've got to go and give Monarch Money a try now. Don't let this financial opportunity slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com on your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com. Code LOCKEDONNFL. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. When you think about the Arizona Cardinals and you think about pass catchers, you of course think about wide receiver Marvin Harrison Jr., but one of the other biggest threats is at tight end and Trey McBride, and the extension or re-signing of the big body tight end might have been one of the Arizona Cardinals' biggest moves this offseason and could give the New Orleans Saints quite a handful to handle in week one. We appreciate you very much making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day, and we thank you for checking us out over on the Gulf Coast Sports and Entertainment Network as well, where we can be found every single Monday through Friday at 10 a.m. For your second listen today, make sure you go and check out the Locked On NFL 2025 season previews, everything that you need to know from across the NFL divisions for this upcoming season. You can find all 8 episodes, one for each division, over at Locked On NFL. It's a proud part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Trey McBride is a big-time kind of focal point for the Arizona Cardinals. One of the best tight ends in the NFL, was signed to a 4-year, $76 million contract. Yes, tight end contracts are nearing $20 million. It's one of the reasons why Juwan Johnson's near $10 million contract, or just over $10 million per year contract, was not a big shock to me. But for Trey McBride, he is a beast. He's a really, really good player. Great pass catcher, very physical tone setter in the blocking game as well. And that Arizona Cardinals team has generated a lot of explosive plays in the run game. And Trey McBride is often a part of that as a key block or two in those situations, but can also go out there and be a pass catcher for you as well. So matchups with linebackers Pete Werner and Demario Davis, as well as safeties Justin Reid, and sometimes I'm sure Julian Blackmon, and even nickel corner Alontae Taylor. If he's in, then it would be, if he's not, then it would be Ugo Amadi there. Those are going to be some important, very, very important things. Now, the good news for New Orleans is that even last year, where they struggled at most things on the defensive side, they only surrendered 714 receiving yards to tight ends. That was the 8th best mark in the NFL. But it's an all-new defense. It's an all-new system. It's an all-new list of players in some cases, and it's an all-new defensive coordinator and play caller. So we'll have to see exactly how all of that ends up having an impact when it comes to guarding the tight end and stopping the tight end. But the Saints will be very, very intent on making sure that Trey McBride does not have a big-time establishing presence in this game, or at least limiting him as much as possible, because you're not going to neutralize him. He's not the only big move for the Arizona Cardinals this offseason, though. How about the addition of Josh Sweat, another four-year, $76 million contract, this time $76.4 million. The former Philadelphia Eagles pass rusher, now headed over to the Arizona Cardinals. He is a Jonathan Gannon guy through and through, and now gets a new opportunity with his new team to be the guy that effectively makes or breaks this defense. The core pass rusher, the guy you got a game plan for all throughout this game. He is the catalyst when it comes to this Arizona Cardinals pass rush going into 2025, trying to reestablish and reset a tone there in that area of the game. And Josh Sweat brings a lot. So guys like Kelvin Banks Jr. as well as Taliesin Fuanga are going to be on high alert, knowing when Josh Sweat is lining up across from or opposite them, so that they can make sure that they're neutralizing the really, really stout pass rusher as best as they can throughout this game. Now, he's not going to be the only one. They also drafted Jordan Birch, who's had a big time presence for them as an outside linebacker rusher for them here so far throughout the preseason. They also drafted cornerback Will Johnson too. Now, Will Johnson fell all the way down to the second round. We figured that he would, because you just don't see any corners. Can't think of a single corner in the NFL that hasn't run a 40-yard dash being drafted in the first round. He continues that trend. So there were speed concerns and there were health concerns for him as well. But if he's all good going into this matchup, obviously he's going to be a big part of trying to create some problems for Spencer Rattler in the passing game. And of course, limit his weapons on the perimeter in Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed, Brandon Cooks, Mason Tipton, Trey Palmer, and of course, Devon Vele. Kind of see where all these players are going to end up kind of being distributed all throughout this. But Will Johnson, somebody to keep an eye out on if he's out on the field, because he can be a very, very good player out there to try to limit what it is that the Saints are looking to do. So there's a lot to watch when it comes to some of the young players that the Arizona Cardinals added throughout this draft. One player, though, that they added throughout this draft that they will not have on the field, and this is now the second year in a row where one of their first-round picks isn't going to be out there to start the season, that is defensive tackle Walter Nolan. Now, Walter Nolan is starting on the physically unable to perform list. That means that he's out for at least the first 4 games, so he will miss this game against the New Orleans Saints. He's dealing with a calf injury. The reason why this is important, it's not necessarily a move, but it's something you need to know, because not having Walter Nolan in the middle means a little bit less disruption in the middle of the offensive line, where the Saints have struggled so far this offseason when it comes to their interior, and it gives the New Orleans Saints a little bit of an opportunity to be able to create some rushing in between the tackles, right? Create some of that pressure on the defense to defend the run, to alleviate some of the pressure on the young quarterback who's got to go out there and make all of this happen. So I'd expect the Saints to go out there early to try to establish a run game. And then, of course, try to get Spencer Rattler in rhythm with some short passes to get everything started. And keeping the pressure off by Josh Sweat and not having Walter Nolan out there are 2 things that could absolutely help all of that happen. So those are some of the biggest things you need to know around the Arizona Cardinals. We'll cover more, but this is just a start in terms of some of the moves, decisions, and factors that make this Week 1 game what it is up against the New Orleans Saints. Okay, last thing I wanted to discuss today was just to walk you through what we're expecting for the rest of this week. Kellen Moore is expected to speak. Typical Monday availability here later on today. So we'll hear from him Tuesday, as always, the day off. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday practices. Those are going to include now injury reports, which were not necessary during the opening portion of like the preseason and training camp and all of this stuff. So we'll start finally be able to kind of track the stuff going on there. We have our crossover Thursdays here on the Locked On Podcast Network. That will continue, where we'll continue to be able to have those conversations with other hosts. I'll probably do a second episode on those days. And then I'm going to try to bring back WWL Wednesday, which means 2-show Wednesdays and Thursdays. And so that's what I'm aiming for all throughout the season. There will be some times where some things don't work out, some schedules don't work, whatever that is. But that's the plan all throughout here. Saturday, we'll discuss elevations. And then, of course, Sundays will be game days where we'll be live with the squad show right after, myself right after that, and then right back at it on Mondays. Now, coming up in tomorrow's episode, we'll take a look at some of the things that we learned from Kellen Moore in his first Week 1 press conference. We'll dive into that and some of the things you should expect to see from this Kellen Moore offense, especially getting it ready for its young quarterback. We got all that coming up for you in tomorrow's show. We appreciate you very much, as always, for making us a part of your day, part of your routine, for saying yes to me on the show. If you see me, please say hi. If you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on your favorite social media at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing, how you living. Let me know how your mom and them. And trust you, that nation. I'll holla at you.